So this is what it's like to mate with humans. The words echoed through the sterile examination room of the Vidian diplomatic ship Xylos, currently docked at Earth's orbital station. Lawrence Gordon, human xenobiologist, raised an eyebrow at the young Vidian female's outburst. Her violet eyes widened in a mix of fascination and horror as she stared at the anatomical diagrams on the holographic display. The fate of two species hung in the balance. Earth and Vidia needed this alliance to stand against the ruthless Kazon Empire. Yet here they were, stumbling over the most basic of biological functions. Lawrence cleared his throat, acutely aware of the delicate situation. "Ren, isn't it?" he asked, trying to keep his tone professional despite the awkwardness. "I take it Vidian reproduction is different?" The junior diplomatic aide nodded vigorously, her pale blue skin flushing a deeper shade. We divide. Painlessly. No physical contact required," she shuddered. "This human method seems barbaric." Lawrence's mind raced. If the Vidians viewed human sexuality with such revulsion, how could their species ever truly understand each other? The alliance talks happening just a few decks above suddenly seemed far more precarious. "It's not barbaric," he said softly. "It's intimate, a connection between partners." Ren's antenna twitched skeptically. But the ambassador, he's already expressed concerns about human aggression. This will only reinforce his fears. Lawrence felt a weight settle in his stomach. The Kazon threat loomed large, and here they were, potentially losing allies over a biological misunderstanding. He made a split-second decision. "Ren, would you be willing to learn more? To truly understand human reproduction and sexuality?" He held up a hand as she recoiled, not through personal experience, of course, but through education, controlled experiments, cultural exchange. The young Vidian hesitated, conflict clear on her alien features. "If it could help the alliance," she began uncertainly. Lawrence nodded encouragingly. "It could make all the difference. We'll start slow, anatomy, then move on to the emotional aspects. I'll design a whole program." As Ren cautiously agreed, neither of them noticed the shadowy figure slipping away from the partially open door. The Kazon spy grinned, sharp teeth glinting in the dim corridor light. He had just discovered a potential wedge to drive between these new allies. Back in the examination room, Lawrence pulled up more detailed holographic models. "Let's begin with the basics," he said, determination in his voice. He knew the stakes couldn't be higher. Two species survival, an interstellar alliance, all hinging on bridging this most fundamental of differences. Ren leaned forward, a mix of curiosity and apprehension on her face. As Lawrence launched into his explanation, he silently prayed this unorthodox diplomacy would be enough to save them all from the Kazon threat. Lawrence took a deep breath, steadying himself as he prepared to dive deeper into this uncharted territory of interspecies education. "All right, Ren," he said, gesturing to a secure door adjacent to the examination room. "Let's continue our discussion in a more private setting." The young Vidian followed him hesitantly, her antenna twitching with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. As they entered the newly designated learning space, Lawrence activated a series of holographic projectors that lined the walls. The room hummed to life, filling with detailed three-dimensional images of human anatomy. Ren's violet eyes widened as she took in the display. "These are internal organs?" she asked, her voice a mix of fascination and revulsion. Lawrence nodded, keeping his tone clinical and detached. "Yes, these are the human reproductive organs. As you can see, they're quite different from Vidian physiology." He manipulated the hologram, highlighting specific areas. "This is the uterus where human offspring develop, and these are the ovaries, which produce eggs." Ren leaned in closer, her initial disgust giving way to scientific curiosity. "Fascinating," she murmured. "And the male organs?" As Lawrence continued his explanation, he noticed Ren's posture gradually relaxing. She began asking more detailed questions, comparing human biology to her own species. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by an atmosphere of mutual learning and discovery. Hours passed as they delved deeper into human physiology. When Lawrence finally called for a break, he noticed a significant change in Wren's demeanor. The young Vidian seemed more at ease, her initial horror replaced by genuine interest. "Wren," Lawrence said carefully, "I'd like to introduce you to some human customs related to physical contact. Non-sexual touching is an important part of our social interactions. Would you be willing to try?" Wren hesitated, her antenna quivering slightly. "What kind of touching?" Lawrence held out his hand. "Let's start with a handshake. It's a common greeting among humans." Wren stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before slowly extending her own. As their palms met, she flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Lawrence gave her hand a gentle shake, then released it. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" he asked with a reassuring smile. Wren flexed her fingers, a look of wonder on her face. It was different, but not unpleasant. Encouraged by her response, Lawrence gradually introduced other forms of non-sexual contact. A pat on the shoulder, a brief hug. With each new experience, Wren's initial discomfort faded, replaced by a growing fascination with human tactile interactions. Unknown to them, a pair of dark eyes watched from a hidden corner of the room. Garrick, the Kazan spy, observed their interactions with growing interest. A cruel smile played across his lips as he silently recorded the lesson, his mind already spinning with ways to use this information against the budding alliance. As Lawrence and Wren's sessions continued, tensions mounted elsewhere on the station. In a stark conference room, Admiral Helena James paced back and forth, frustration etched on her face. Across the table, Ambassador Thoran sat rigidly, his pale blue skin flushed with agitation. "Ambassador," James said, struggling to keep her voice level, "surely you can see the benefits of this alliance. The Kazan threat—" Thoran cut her off with a sharp gesture. "The Kazan are a concern, yes, but so is the aggressive nature of your species. These mating practices of yours, they're barbaric." James sighed, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "Ambassador, I assure you, human sexuality is not a threat to your people. Perhaps if we could find a way to bridge this cultural gap—" Her words were interrupted by a soft chime. A message flashed across her datapad. "Admiral, request assistance with Vidian cultural matters. Urgent. Lawrence Gordon." James' eyes narrowed. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they needed. "Ambassador," she said, a new note of tenacity in her voice, "I believe I may have a solution. Give me 24 hours to consult with my xenobiology team. I promise you, we'll find a way to address your concerns." Back in the private learning room, Lawrence prepared for the next phase of Wren's education. He had set up a holographic simulation of a human social gathering, complete with virtual participants engaged in various forms of non-sexual physical contact. "Today," he explained to Wren, "we're going to explore the emotional aspects of human physical intimacy. These simulations will demonstrate how touch can convey comfort, affection, and support." Wren nodded, her earlier hesitation replaced by eager curiosity. As the simulation began, she watched intently, asking questions about the nuances of each interaction. Lawrence guided her through the scenarios, explaining the cultural context and emotional significance of each touch. As the lesson progressed, Lawrence noticed Wren's growing comfort with the concept of physical contact. Her questions became more nuanced, focusing on the emotional connections between humans rather than the mere mechanics of touch. "Lawrence," she said suddenly, her violet eyes meeting his, "I think I'm beginning to understand. This intimacy, it's not just about reproduction, is it? It's about connection, about sharing something deeper." Lawrence felt a surge of hope. This was the breakthrough he'd been working towards. "That's exactly right, Wren. Physical intimacy for humans is as much about emotional bonds as it is about reproduction." Wren's antenna quivered with excitement. "I want to understand more. Can we try a real experiment, not just simulations?" Lawrence hesitated, acutely aware of the delicate nature of their situation. "What did you have in mind?" "You mentioned something called a massage earlier. Could we try that? I want to experience these sensations for myself, to truly understand." Lawrence considered the request carefully. This could be a pivotal moment in their cultural exchange, but he needed to proceed with caution. All right, he said finally. We'll start with a simple hand massage. It's a safe, non-sexual form of touch that can help you understand the pleasure humans derive from physical contact. As Lawrence began the gentle massage, Wren's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh," she exclaimed softly. That's quite pleasant." Lawrence smiled, relieved at her positive reaction. "You see, physical touch doesn't have to be frightening or aggressive. It can be a source of comfort and connection." As they continued the experiment, neither of them noticed the small, blinking device hidden in the corner of the room. Garrick watched the feed from his hidden quarters, his sharp teeth bared in a triumphant grin. This was exactly the kind of material he needed to drive a wedge between the humans and Vidians. With swift, practiced movements, Garrick began composing a message to his Kazon superiors. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he outlined his plan to use this newfound information to sabotage the alliance. Little did Lawrence and Wren know, their innocent exploration of human intimacy was about to become the center of an interstellar diplomatic crisis. Lawrence's mind raced as he considered the implications of their innocent exploration. He needed to act quickly to salvage the situation and protect the fragile alliance. "Wren, I've been called to an emergency meeting with Admiral James," Lawrence said, his voice tinged with urgency. "I need you to stay here in this secure area. We'll continue our discussion when I return." Wren nodded, her antenna twitching with curiosity. As Lawrence hurried out of the room, she found herself alone in the unfamiliar surroundings of the orbital station. Despite Lawrence's instructions, her newfound fascination with human culture compelled her to explore further. Slipping out of the secure area, Wren wandered through the station's corridors, marveling at the sleek design and bustling activity. Her steps led her to a large, open space filled with the sound of laughter and excited chatter. Peering inside, she discovered a group of off-duty human crew members engaged in various leisure activities. Wren hesitated at the threshold, her earlier apprehension resurfacing, but as she observed the humans' easy camaraderie, she remembered Lawrence's lessons on social interactions. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the room. A tall, broad-shouldered human with a friendly smile noticed her immediately. "Hey there," he called out, waving her over. "I don't think we've met. I'm Mike. Want to join us?" Wren's antenna quivered nervously, but she nodded and approached the group. "I'm Wren," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not familiar with your recreational activities." Mike's grin widened. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Come on, I'll show you around." Over the next hour, Wren found herself immersed in a whirlwind of human pastimes. She learned the basics of poker, marveling at the subtle interplay of strategy and deception. In the holographic sports simulator, she attempted to play tennis, her alien physiology lending itself to unpredictable shots that left her human opponents both frustrated and amused. As Wren grew more comfortable, her natural curiosity emerged. During a break in the games, she turned to Mike. "May I ask you something personal?" Mike nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Sure, fire away." "I've been learning about human relationships," Wren said, her violet eyes wide with interest. "Could you tell me about your experiences with dating?" Mike chuckled, setting down his glass. "Well, that's a loaded question. Dating can be wonderful and terrible, often at the same time." He launched into a story about his first romantic relationship, detailing the butterflies in his stomach, the awkward silences, and the exhilarating first kiss. Wren listened, enraptured. The clinical descriptions Lawrence had provided paled in comparison to the raw emotion in Mike's voice as he spoke about love and heartbreak. Other crew members joined in, sharing their own tales of romance and physical intimacy. As Wren absorbed these stories, her perspective on human mating practices began to shift. The fear and revulsion she had initially felt gave way to a growing fascination. She began to see the beauty in the vulnerability and connection humans shared through physical intimacy. Meanwhile, Lawrence found himself in Admiral James's office, the weight of the diplomatic crisis pressing down on him. Ambassador Thoran's holographic image flickered before them, his face contorted with hardly restrained disgust. "Admiral," Thoran said, his voice cold, I cannot in good conscience recommend this alliance to my people. The aggressive nature of human mating practices is simply too great a risk. Admiral James leaned forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Ambassador, I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. If you'd allow us to explain— Explanations are not necessary, Thoran interrupted. We've seen enough. Unless you can provide concrete evidence that humans are capable of non-aggressive intimacy, I'm afraid we must withdraw from these talks. As the transmission ended, Admiral James turned to Lawrence, her expression grim. Gordon, we're running out of options. Find a way to bridge this gap, or we lose our best chance at standing against the Kazan. Lawrence nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He needed to find Wren and use her newfound understanding to sway the Vidayan delegation. As he hurried out of the office, he failed to notice the nondescript human security officer watching him intently. The officer, actually Garrick, the Kazan spy, fell into step beside Lawrence. Sir, he said, his voice carefully modulated to hide his true identity. I've been briefed on the situation with the Vidians. I have some information that might help. Lawrence glanced at him, surprised but grateful for any assistance. Go on. As they walked, Garrick began to spin a web of lies, mixing truth with carefully crafted falsehoods about Vidayan cultural taboos. Lawrence listened intently, but as the conversation progressed, he noticed inconsistencies in the officer's statements. Wait, Lawrence said, holding up a hand. You just said Vidians consider all physical contact taboo, but earlier you mentioned their formal greeting involves clasping hands. Which is it? Garrick's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his composure returned. My apologies, sir. I must have misspoken. If you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend to. As Garrick hurried away, Lawrence's suspicions crystallized. He tapped his communicator, alerting station security to the potential threat. With the alarm raised, he resumed his search for Wren, hoping he wasn't too late to salvage the situation. Back in the recreation area, Wren found herself caught up in an impromptu tennis match with Mike. As they darted around the holographic court, Wren's antenna picked up the subtle shifts in air current caused by Mike's movements. She lunged for a difficult shot, her alien reflexes allowing her to reach the ball. In that moment, Wren's momentum carried her directly into Mike's path. They collided, Mike's arms instinctively wrapping around her to prevent her from falling. Wren gasped, not from pain or fear, but from the unexpected rush of sensation that coursed through her body. Time seemed to slow as Wren became acutely aware of every point of contact between them. The warmth of Mike's skin, the steady beat of his heart, the gentle pressure of his hands on her back. It all combined into a symphony of sensation unlike anything she had experienced before. As they disentangled themselves, Wren found herself breathing heavily, her pale blue skin flushed a deeper shade. Mike, she said, her voice trembling slightly. What was that? Those sensations? Mike rubbed the back of his neck, a slight blush creeping up his cheeks. Well, Wren, that's what we call physical attraction. It's a natural response when we're in close contact with someone we find appealing. Wren's mind whirled with this new information. But it felt good, pleasant. Not at all like the aggression I was led to believe human contact involved. Before Mike could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A voice crackled over the intercom. Security alert. All personnel report to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. As chaos erupted around them, Lawrence burst into the recreation area, his eyes frantically searching for Wren. When he spotted her with Mike and the other crew members, relief washed over him, quickly followed by surprise at her relaxed demeanor. Wren, he called out, making his way through the crowd. We need to go, now. As Wren hurried to join him, Lawrence noticed the lingering glance she exchanged with Mike. In that moment, he realized that his carefully planned education had taken an unexpected turn, one that might just save their alliance if they could survive the impending Kazan threat. With sirens wailing and security forces mobilizing around them, Lawrence gripped Wren's arm, guiding her towards the nearest secure area. Wren, he said urgently, I need you to tell me everything you've learned about human intimacy. The fate of our alliance, and possibly our civilizations, may depend on it. Wren nodded, her expression a mix of excitement and willpower. As they rushed through the chaotic corridors of the station, she began to speak, her words painting a picture of human relationships, far different from the clinical descriptions they had started with. Lawrence listened intently, his mind already formulating a new approach to the Vidian ambassador. But first, they had to survive the Kazon threat looming over the station. As they reached the secure area, Lawrence's communicator chirped with an incoming transmission from Admiral James. Whatever came next would shape the future of human-Vidian relations and determine whether they would stand united against the Kazon or face the threat alone. As Lawrence's communicator chirped with Admiral James's incoming transmission, the station's alarms suddenly blared to life. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow as the intercom crackled with urgent announcements. All personnel, this is a station-wide alert. We have a confirmed Kazon infiltrator on board. Report to your designated secure locations immediately. This is not a drill. Lawrence gripped Wren's arm tighter, his eyes darting around the chaotic corridor. Change of plans, he said, his voice tense. We need to get to safety first. They hurried through the station, weaving through panicked crowds of humans and Vidians alike. As they approached a junction, a security officer waved them in opposite directions. You human, head to Secure Zone A, the officer barked, pointing Lawrence down one corridor. He then turned to Wren. Vidian, Secure Zone B is this way. Lawrence opened his mouth to protest, but the officer cut him off. No exceptions. Move. With a final concerned glance at Wren, Lawrence reluctantly released her arm. Stay safe, he called out, as they were swept apart by the surging crowd. Wren found herself ushered into a large emergency shelter, packed with a mix of humans and Vidians. The air was thick with tension and fear. As the hours crawled by, Wren's gaze was drawn to the human couples scattered throughout the room. A young woman sat huddled against her partner, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Nearby, an older couple held hands, their fingers intertwined as they whispered words of comfort to each other. In a corner, two men embraced, their foreheads touching as they shared a tender kiss. Wren watched, fascinated. The physical intimacy she observed was a far cry from the aggressive, frightening acts she had once imagined. Instead, she saw solace, support, and deep emotional connection in every touch. Her antenna twitched as she picked up snippets of worried conversations from a group of Vidian diplomats huddled nearby. Their faces were etched with anxiety, their bodies rigid with stress. Taking a deep breath, Wren approached them. Excuse me, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I couldn't help but notice your distress. May I share something with you? The diplomats turned to her, surprise and curiosity momentarily replacing their fear. One of them, a younger delegate with vibrant green eyes, nodded encouragingly. Wren began to speak, her words hesitant at first, but growing in passion as she continued. She recounted her journey from fear to fascination, describing the comfort and connection she had witnessed in human physical intimacy. It's not at all what I first believed, she explained, her violet eyes shining with newfound understanding. Their touch isn't about aggression or dominance. It's about support, about sharing strength and comfort in times of need. As she spoke, the younger Vidians leaned in, their interest piqued. One of them, a slender female with intricate facial markings, asked, "But how can such physical contact not lead to the spread of disease?" Wren smiled, recalling Lawrence's explanations. The humans have advanced medical technologies and rigorous health protocols. Their intimate gestures are safe, I assure you. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Lawrence found himself assisting the security teams in their search for Garrick. His knowledge of Vidian physiology proved invaluable as they combed through potential hiding spots. As they cleared a maintenance bay, Lawrence spotted a familiar face. "Mike!" he called out, recognizing the crew member who had interacted with Wren earlier. Mike jogged over, his expression a mix of concern and grit. "Sir," he said, nodding respectfully. "Any sign of the spy?" Lawrence shook his head. "Not yet. How are you holding up?" Mike's features softened slightly. "I'm all right. I've been thinking about your Vidian friend, actually. Wren, right?" Lawrence's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Yes, that's right. What about her?" Mike rubbed the back of his neck, a small smile playing on his lips. She was incredible earlier in the rec area, so curious about everything human. You should have seen her face when we accidentally bumped into each other during tennis. It was like she was experiencing touch for the first time. Lawrence listened intently, his mind racing with the implications of Mike's words. Before he could respond, his communicator beeped urgently. "Gordon," Admiral James's voice crackled through the device. "We've detected a cloaked Kazon vessel attempting to dock. All available personnel are to prepare for a potential boarding attempt." Lawrence's teeth clenched. He knew that the success of the Human-Vidian alliance was more critical now than ever. In a flash of inspiration, he tapped his communicator again. "Admiral, permission to contact Ambassador Thoran?" There was a brief pause before James responded. "Granted, but make it quick, Gordon. We're running out of time." Lawrence quickly established a connection with the Vidian ambassador, who was secured in a separate part of the station. "Ambassador Thoran," he began, his voice urgent but controlled. "I know our negotiations have been strained, but we face an immediate threat. I propose a joint human-Vidian defense against the Kazon." Thoran's holographic image flickered, his expression guarded. "And why should we risk our people in your conflict, Mr. Gordon?" Lawrence leaned in, his eyes intense. "Because this is our opportunity to demonstrate that despite our differences, we can work together effectively. Our cooperation now could be the foundation of a strong, lasting alliance." Thoran was silent for a long moment, his gaze unfocused as if listening to an unseen advisor. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, Mr. Gordon. I will authorize a small contingent of our security personnel to join your defenders at key points throughout the station." As Lawrence ended the transmission, a wave of relief washed over him. It wasn't a full alliance, but it was a start. The next hours were a blur of activity as human and Vidian forces integrated their defenses. Lawrence found himself racing from one strategic point to another, coordinating communication between the two species. It was during a brief lull in the preparations that Lawrence finally managed to reunite with Wren. He spotted her emerging from a secure area, her pale blue skin flushed with excitement. "Lawrence," she called out, surprising him by initiating a hug. As she pulled back, her eyes sparkled with newfound confidence. "I have so much to tell you about human physical intimacy and its role in emotional bonding." Before Lawrence could respond, the station's alarms blared once again. A voice boomed over the intercom. "Alert! Kazon boarding parties detected in Sector 7 and 12. All personnel to battle stations." Lawrence grabbed Wren's hand, pulling her along as they ran down the corridor. "We need to get to the defensive line," he shouted over the din of the alarms. They turned a corner and found themselves face-to-face with a group of advancing Kazon warriors. Behind them, they could hear the shouts and weapons fire of the human-Vidian defenders. With no time to reach the defensive line, Lawrence made a split-second decision. He yanked open a nearby maintenance hatch and pushed Wren inside, following close behind. The space was incredibly tight, forcing their bodies close together as Lawrence pulled the hatch closed. In the darkness of the maintenance shaft, Wren became acutely aware of every point of contact between her body and Lawrence's. She could feel the rapid rise and fall of his chest, hear the pounding of his heart. The fear and excitement of the moment mixed with her newfound understanding of human intimacy, creating a potent cocktail of emotions. As the sounds of battle erupted in the corridor outside, Wren found herself drawn to Lawrence in a way she had never expected. The terror of their situation paradoxically heightened her attraction, making her hyper-aware of his warmth, his scent, the strength of his arms around her. In that moment, trapped in the dark, with the fate of the station hanging in the balance, Wren experienced a profound shift in her perception of human mating practices. The lingering fears she had harbored melted away, replaced by a deep, visceral appreciation for the power of physical and emotional connection. As they clung to each other in the cramped maintenance shaft, the battle raging just beyond its thin walls, Wren realized that she had stumbled upon something far more complex and beautiful than she had ever imagined. The true nature of human intimacy, she now understood, was not something to be feared, but something to be explored, cherished, and perhaps even embraced. Explored, cherished, and perhaps even embraced. Suddenly, The maintenance shaft shuddered violently. The sounds of battle intensified, metal screeching against metal as the Kazon boarding party stormed through the corridor. Lawrence instinctively tightened his grip on Ren, their bodies pressed even closer in the cramped space. Ren's antenna quivered, picking up the vibrations of heavy footsteps and energy weapons discharging mere inches away. Her breath came in short, rapid bursts, mingling with Lawrence's in the confined air. The fear was palpable, electric, coursing through her body and amplifying every sensation. In that moment, driven by a potent mixture of adrenaline, fear, and newfound attraction, Ren acted on impulse. She tilted her head up, her violet eyes meeting Lawrence's in the dim light filtering through the hatch's seams. Without a word, she pressed her lips to his. The kiss was clumsy, urgent, and entirely unexpected. Lawrence froze for a split second, his mind turning from the sudden intimate contact. Then, almost against his will, he found himself responding, his lips moving against hers with a gentleness that belied the chaos surrounding them. As they parted, both stunned by the spontaneous act, a stray weapons blast struck the wall adjacent to their hiding spot. The maintenance shaft groaned ominously, and acrid smoke began to seep through the seams of the hatch. "We need to move," Lawrence whispered urgently, his voice hoarse. "The shaft's compromised." With practiced efficiency, he eased the hatch open, scanning the corridor for immediate threats. Seeing a momentary lull in the fighting, he pulled himself out, then reached back to help Ren. They emerged into a scene of utter chaos. The pristine corridors of the station had been transformed into a war zone. Scorch marks marred the walls, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of ozone from energy weapons. A squad of human and Vidian defenders crouched behind makeshift barricades at the far end of the corridor, exchanging fire with a group of advancing Kazon warriors. Lawrence's scientific mind kicked into overdrive as he observed the firefight. "Wait a minute," he muttered, his eyes narrowing as he watched a Kazon blast strike a human defender, who crumpled instantly. The same weapon hit a Vidian moments later, but the alien merely staggered, quickly regaining their footing. Lawrence grabbed Ren's arm, pulling her behind a fallen support beam for cover. "The Kazon weapons," he explained hurriedly. "They're calibrated for human physiology. They're not as effective against Vidians." Ren's eyes widened with understanding. Without hesitation, she tapped her communicator, relaying the information to the nearest Vidian security officer. The effect was almost immediate. The defenders quickly adjusted their formation, with Vidian personnel taking point, while humans provided supporting fire and tactical coordination. The Kazon advance faltered as their primary weapons proved less lethal against the newly positioned Vidian front line. As the battle raged on, Ren found herself drawing on her recent observations of human physical intimacy. "Lawrence," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "I have an idea. The Kazon weapons are less effective at close range. If we engage in close quarters combat, we might have an advantage." Lawrence nodded, quickly grasping the implications. He relayed the strategy to the human Vidian defenders. The joint force began to push forward, closing the distance with the Kazon invaders. Vidian security personnel, naturally more resilient to the Kazon weapons, led the charge while humans provided cover fire and tactical support. In the midst of the melee, Lawrence and Ren found themselves working in perfect synchrony. Their recent intimate experience had fostered an unspoken understanding, allowing them to anticipate each other's movements with uncanny precision. Lawrence would call out targets and Ren would swiftly neutralize them with well-placed strikes, her Vidian physiology giving her a distinct advantage in close combat. Their seamless cooperation did not go unnoticed. Other human Vidian pairs began to emulate their tactics, leading to a marked improvement in the overall effectiveness of the defense. The tide of battle slowly but surely turned in favor of the station's defenders. However, the victory was far from assured. A particularly brutish Kazon warrior, his face adorned with intricate tattoos denoting his high rank, broke through the defensive line with a small group of elite soldiers. Lawrence recognized him from intelligence briefings. Crag, the leader of this Kazon sect. Crag's eyes locked onto Lawrence, a predatory grin spreading across his scarred face. "You," he growled, hefting a massive energy axe, "the human who dares to ally with the Vidian scum. Your death will send a message to all who oppose the Kazon. As Crag charged forward, Wren stepped between them, her stance low and ready. Lawrence was struck by the transformation in his Vidian companion. Gone was the timid researcher, replaced by a fierce protector whose every movement spoke of newfound confidence and commitment. Wren dodged Crag's first swing, her movements fluid and precise. She countered with a series of quick jabs, targeting vulnerable points in the Kazon's armor, weak spots she had observed during the earlier fighting. Crag roared in frustration, his attacks becoming wilder and less coordinated. Seizing an opening, Wren executed a complex maneuver that Lawrence recognized from human martial arts. She used Crag's own momentum against him, redirecting his charge and sending him crashing into a nearby wall. The energy axe clattered to the ground, spinning away from the stunned Kazon leader. Lawrence didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, scooping up a fallen stun baton. With a swift, precise strike, he brought the weapon down on Crag's unprotected neck. The Kazon leader convulsed once before collapsing, unconscious. A hush fell over the battlefield as word of Crag's defeat spread through the Kazon ranks. Without their leader, the remaining invaders quickly lost heart. Within minutes, the corridor was filled with the sound of Kazon warriors retreating to their ship. As the last of the Kazon forces disengaged from the station, Lawrence and Wren found themselves at the center of a celebrating crowd of humans and Vidians. The shared victory had broken down barriers, with members of both species clasping hands, patting backs, and even embracing in the heat of the moment. Amidst the jubilation, Lawrence's communicator chirped. "Gordon," Admiral James's voice cut through the noise. "Report to the command center immediately. Bring your Vidian colleague. The Leadership Council is convening to discuss the implications of this attack." As they made their way through the battered corridors of the station, Lawrence and Wren exchanged a loaded glance. The kiss they had shared in the maintenance shaft hung between them, unspoken but impossible to ignore. "Wren," Lawrence began, his voice low, "about what happened earlier." Wren's antenna twitched, a gesture Lawrence had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. I don't regret it," she said softly. "My fear of human mating practices, it's gone, replaced by something more." Lawrence nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. "We should talk about this," he said, "after the council meeting." As they approached the command center, both were acutely aware that their personal journey of cultural understanding could be the key to cementing the alliance between their species. Yet they also knew that significant challenges lay ahead. Conservative elements in both societies might resist closer human-Vidian relations. The doors to the command center hissed open, revealing a room filled with the highest-ranking human and Vidian officials on the station. Admiral James and Ambassador Thoran stood at the head of the table, their expressions grave but tinged with hope. "Mr. Gordon, Ms. Wren," Admiral James said, gesturing for them to take seats at the table. "We have much to discuss about the future of our alliance." As Lawrence and Wren settled into their chairs, they shared one last meaningful look. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as partners, as representatives of their species, and as something more that they had yet to fully define. Define the future of their alliance. As Lawrence and Wren settled into their seats, the atmosphere in the council chambers was charged with tension. Human and Vidian leaders sat on opposite sides of a large circular table, their body language betraying the unease that lingered despite their recent victory. Admiral James stood, her posture commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss the implications of the recent Kazon attack and the future of our alliance. First, I want to commend the joint effort that repelled the invaders. The effectiveness of our cooperation cannot be overstated." Ambassador Thoran nodded in agreement but raised a hand. "While I concur that our combined forces were instrumental in defeating the Kazon, I must express ongoing concerns about our cultural compatibility, particularly in regards to intimate practices." A murmur rippled through the assembled leaders. Lawrence felt Wren stiffen beside him, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. To his surprise, she suddenly stood. "Ambassador, Admiral, esteemed council members," Wren began, her voice wavering slightly, "I request permission to address the council on this matter." Admiral James raised an eyebrow but nodded. Granted, Ms. Wren. Please proceed. Wren took a deep breath, her violet eyes scanning the room. I stand before you as someone who once harbored an intense fear of human mating practices. The very idea terrified me, clouding my judgment and hindering my ability to fully engage with our human allies. She paused, her gaze briefly meeting Lawrence's. He offered an encouraging nod. However, my experiences on this station, particularly during the recent attack, have transformed my perspective. I've come to understand that intimacy between our species is not something to be feared, but a bridge that can bring us closer together. Wren's words captivated both human and Vidian delegates. Lawrence observed the shifting expressions around the table: surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, discomfort. Seizing the moment, Lawrence stood. If I may, I'd like to propose an initiative that could address these concerns and strengthen our alliance. Admiral James gestured for him to continue. I suggest we implement a cultural exchange program focused on intimate practices and relationships. Volunteers from both species would participate in supervised interactions, fostering mutual understanding and breaking down barriers. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. Some council members leaned forward, eyes alight with interest, while others recoiled, their faces contorted in shock or disgust. Senior diplomat Zara, a stern-faced Vidian, slammed her hand on the table. This is preposterous. Exposure to human mating practices could corrupt our society, leading to moral decay. We cannot allow this. Dr. Emily Carter, a human xenoanthropologist with silver hair and keen eyes, countered, on the contrary, embracing diversity and understanding different approaches to intimacy could strengthen both our species. We have so much to learn from each other. The debate intensified, with arguments flying back and forth across the table. Ambassador Thoran raised his voice above the din. Perhaps it's time we put this to a vote. We must decide on the future of our alliance and this proposed cultural exchange. Just as the council members prepared to cast their votes, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Admiral James's communicator chirped urgently. Admiral, a panicked voice reported, long-range sensors have detected a massive Kazan fleet approaching. It's far larger than the previous attack force. The room fell silent, the weight of this new threat crushing the previous discord. Admiral James's face hardened. We need to set aside our differences and focus on the immediate danger. I propose we integrate our technologies and tactics to create a unified defense system. Ambassador Thoran nodded grimly. Agreed. We can revisit our cultural debates once we've ensured our survival. As the station mobilized for battle, Lawrence and Wren found themselves thrust into a new role. Admiral James approached them, her expression grave. Gordon, Wren, I need you to lead a mixed team of human and Vidian scientists. Your mission is to adapt Vidian medical technology to enhance human resistance to Kazan weapons. Use what you observed during the last attack. It's our best shot at evening the odds. Lawrence and Wren exchanged a determined look. We're on it, Admiral, Lawrence affirmed. They hurried to the research lab, where a team of human and Vidian scientists awaited their instructions. The atmosphere was tense, with members of both species eyeing each other warily. Listen up, Lawrence announced. We don't have time for cultural barriers. We need to work together to create a biological shield that can protect our human defenders. Wren stepped forward. This will require intimate knowledge of both human and Vidian physiology. We must trust each other and share our expertise freely. As they delved into their work, the initial awkwardness began to fade. Human and Vidian scientists huddled together over displays, exchanging ideas and building on each other's suggestions. Lawrence noticed the growing camaraderie, a sense of shared purpose overriding their differences. The station shuddered as the first wave of the Kazan fleet entered the system. Distant explosions reverberated through the hull as the outer defenses engaged the enemy. We're running out of time, Wren muttered, her fingers flying over a console. Lawrence nodded, his mind racing. What if we combine the Vidian tissue regeneration technique with a modified version of human radiation therapy? It could create a temporary cellular shield against the Kazon weapons. Ren's eyes widened. That could work, but it would need testing. The risks. I'll do it, Lawrence said firmly. I'll be the first test subject. Ren's antenna quivered. Lawrence, no, it's too dangerous. Let me... There's no time to argue, Lawrence insisted. You know the procedure better than anyone. I trust you, Ren. As Ren prepared the experimental treatment, alarms blared throughout the station. A security alert flashed across the lab's screens. Kazon commandos had breached the outer defenses and infiltrated the station. Lawrence lay on the treatment bed, his heart pounding as Ren readied the equipment. The sounds of battle grew closer. Whatever happens, Lawrence said, reaching out to squeeze Ren's hand. I'm glad we're facing this together. Ren's violet eyes met his, filled with a complex mix of emotions. So am I, Lawrence. Now let's save this station. As Ren activated the shield procedure, the lab doors hissed open. A group of heavily armed Kazon warriors burst in, their weapons trained on the scientists. Lawrence felt the experimental shield coursing through his body, untested and uncertain, as he faced this new threat. The fate of the station, the Alliance, and their own lives hung in the balance as the Kazon advanced, fingers tightening on their triggers on their weapons. Lawrence's heart raced as he felt the experimental shield coursing through his veins, its effects unknown and untested. In that split second, Lawrence made a decision. He activated the prototype fully, despite the incomplete procedure. A faint, shimmering aura enveloped his body, barely visible to the naked eye. The Kazon opened fire, their energy weapons unleashing a barrage of deadly bolts. Lawrence instinctively raised his arms to shield himself, expecting searing pain. Instead, he watched in amazement as the energy dissipated harmlessly against his shimmering barrier. Seizing the moment of surprise, Lawrence charged the nearest Kazon commando. His enhanced resilience allowed him to close the distance unscathed. He tackled the alien warrior, using his momentum to slam the Kazon against a nearby console. Ren, quick to react, dove for a fallen stun baton. She scooped it up and swung it in a wide arc, catching another Kazon across the chest. The alien convulsed and dropped to the floor. "Lawrence!" Ren called out, tossing him a second baton she'd retrieved. He caught it deftly, turning to face the remaining commandos. The Kazon, realizing their weapons were ineffective against Lawrence, switched to hand-to-hand combat. They charged forward, brandishing wicked-looking knives. Lawrence met their assault head-on, his movements fluid and confident. He blocked a knife thrust with his forearm, the blade skittering off his shielded skin. Retaliating, he struck the Kazon's solar plexus with the stun baton, dropping him instantly. Ren, meanwhile, found herself cornered by two Kazon warriors. She ducked under a wild swing, her antenna twitching with nervous energy. As she prepared to counterattack, she felt a hand grasp her shoulder. It was Lawrence pulling her close. To Ren's astonishment, the shimmering aura extended to encompass her as well. The Kazon's next attack bounced harmlessly off the shared shield. Taking advantage of their bewilderment, Ren and Lawrence struck in unison, their stun batons finding vulnerable spots on the Kazon's bodies. As the last commando fell, alarms blared throughout the station. Admiral James's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel, fall back to designated safe zones immediately. The main Kazon fleet has breached our outer defenses and is preparing to board en masse." Lawrence and Ren exchanged a look of understanding. Their biological shield could be the key to saving the station. "We need to get to the central medical bay," Lawrence said, his voice urgent. "If we can replicate this shield for the station's defenders..." Ren nodded, her violet eyes gleaming with willpower. "It's our best chance. Let's move." They burst into the corridor, immediately assaulted by the chaos of a station under siege. Panicked crew members rushed past, while distant explosions shook the deck beneath their feet. Lawrence took point, his shimmering shield deflecting stray energy blasts. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a group of Kazon warriors terrorizing a mixed group of human and Vidian civilians. Without hesitation, Lawrence charged into the fray. His enhanced durability allowed him to weather the Kazon's attacks, giving Ren openings to strike with precision. Working in perfect synchronization, they cleared the area. Wren noticed that each time she made physical contact with Lawrence, the shield's effects briefly extended to her. This discovery hinted at possibilities that could revolutionize their defense strategy. They pressed on, navigating through the labyrinth of corridors. The journey became a vivid demonstration of human-Vidian symbiosis. When Lawrence's enhanced strength was needed to clear debris, Wren guided him through with her superior spatial awareness. When Wren's natural resilience to Kazon weapons proved crucial in a firefight, Lawrence's shield provided the extra edge they needed to survive. Finally, they reached the central medical bay. The doors were sealed, a safety protocol during the attack. Lawrence pounded on the reinforced metal. "Dr. Carter, it's Lawrence, Gordon, and Wren. We have a breakthrough that could save the station." After a tense moment, the doors slid open. Dr. Emily Carter stood there, her silver hair disheveled and her keen eyes wary. Behind her, a mixed team of human and Vidian medical staff had transformed the bay into a makeshift fortress. "This better be good, Gordon," Carter said, ushering them inside. "We're losing ground fast out there." Lawrence quickly explained the biological shield, demonstrating its effectiveness by having one of the staff fire a low-powered Kazon weapon at him. The energy dissipated harmlessly against his shimmering aura, eliciting gasps from the assembled team. Dr. Carter's skepticism transformed into cautious optimism. "If we can replicate this, but we'll need to refine it, test it." "We don't have time for extensive testing," Wren interjected. "Every minute we delay, more of our people die." The mixed human-Vidian team sprang into action. Lawrence and Wren's intimate knowledge of the prototype proved invaluable as they worked to refine the shield. The process required close physical interaction between humans and Vidians, breaking down the last vestiges of discomfort between the species. As they worked feverishly, reports filtered in of Kazon forces pushing deeper into the station. The human-Vidian defensive lines were faltering under the relentless assault. Wren, her hands deep in a complex array of Vidian medical equipment, suddenly froze. Her antenna twitched rapidly, a sign Lawrence had come to recognize as the precursor to a breakthrough. "What if we incorporate elements of Vidian cellular regeneration into the shield design?" she proposed, her eyes bright with inspiration. "It could allow the shield to repair itself and the wearer, greatly enhancing its effectiveness." Dr. Carter leaned forward, intrigued. "That's brilliant, but how would we—" "We'd need to extract specific cellular components from a Vidian donor," Wren explained. She took a deep breath. "I volunteer." Lawrence's head snapped up. "Wren, no. The procedure could be dangerous. We don't know." "We don't have a choice," Wren countered, her voice firm. "The survival of both our species is at stake. This is bigger than any one of us." The medical team quickly prepared for the extraction. Lawrence stood by Wren's side as she lay on the biobed, his hand clasping hers tightly. As the procedure began, Wren winced in pain, her grip on Lawrence's hand tightening. "Stay with me," Lawrence murmured, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her skin. Wren managed a small smile. "Always." As the refined biological shield neared completion, a massive explosion rocked the station. Alarms screamed, and Admiral James's voice came over the intercom once more. "All hands, this is Admiral James. The Kazon have breached our reactor core. If we can't stabilize it, we're looking at a complete meltdown. I need volunteers to—" Lawrence didn't let her finish. He stepped forward, his eyebrows furrowed. "I'll go. With this shield, I can withstand the radiation." Wren, still recovering on the biobed, pushed herself up. "I'm coming with you." "Wren, you're in no condition to—" "We started this together," she said, her violet eyes meeting his. "We'll finish it together." As they prepared to embark on their perilous mission to the reactor core, Lawrence and Wren shared a moment of profound connection. Their journey from fear to trust, and now to potential sacrifice, embodied the evolving relationship between their species. Dr. Carter approached, holding 2 injectors. "This is the refined shield formula. It should provide maximum protection, but we haven't had time to test for side effects. Are you sure about this?" Lawrence and Wren exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. As Dr. Carter administered the injections, Lawrence felt the shield surge through him, stronger than before. Beside him, Wren's skin took on a subtle, iridescent sheen. Whatever happens, Lawrence said, his voice low, I'm glad we're in this together. Ren's antenna twitched with emotion. So am I, Lawrence. Now let's save the station. Hand in hand, they stepped out of the medical bay and into the chaos beyond. The fate of the station, the Alliance, and possibly their entire civilizations now rested on their shoulders. As they led their mixed human-Vidian team towards the compromised reactor core, Lawrence and Ren knew that the next few minutes would determine not only their personal futures, but the course of interstellar history itself. As Lawrence and Ren led their mixed human-Vidian team towards the compromised reactor core, the station shuddered violently. A thunderous boom echoed through the corridors, followed by the screech of tearing metal. Lawrence stumbled, bracing himself against a wall as debris rained down from the ceiling. We're running out of time, Ren said, her antenna twitching nervously. She helped a human engineer regain his footing, her touch leaving a faint iridescent trail on his sleeve. Lawrence nodded, his teeth clenched. Let's move. They pressed forward, navigating the labyrinth of debris-strewn passageways. The air grew thick with acrid smoke, stinging their eyes and lungs. As they approached the reactor chamber, radiation alarms blared, their urgent wails echoing off the metal walls. Lawrence's shield flickered as he stepped into the chamber, the intense radiation pushing the prototype to its limits. He felt a surge of heat course through his body, his skin prickling uncomfortably. Lawrence! Ren called out, her voice infused with concern. She rushed to his side, her weakened state evident in her slightly unsteady gait. The moment their hands touched, Lawrence felt his shield stabilize, drawing strength from their connection. The reactor chamber was a scene of utter chaos. Coolant sprayed from ruptured pipes, creating a ghostly mist that swirled around their ankles. Sparks erupted from shattered consoles, casting eerie shadows across the walls. At the center of it all, the reactor core pulsed with an ominous, unstable energy. We need to manually stabilize the core, shouted Dr. Kira, a Vidian nuclear physicist. She gestured towards a bank of controls near the reactor housing. If we can't bring the reaction under control, we're looking at a complete meltdown within minutes. The team sprang into action, human and Vidian alike working in perfect harmony. Lawrence and Ren moved to a malfunctioning control panel, their hands flying across the intricate array of buttons and switches. Suddenly, a violent explosion rocked the chamber. The reinforced doors buckled inward, revealing a group of heavily armed Kazan elites. At their head stood Crag, his scarred face twisted in a triumphant snarl. Did you really think you could keep me contained? Crag sneered, raising his weapon. This station will be our prize, or it will be your tomb. The chamber erupted into chaos as the Kazan opened fire. Lawrence instinctively pulled Ren close, his shield expanding to encompass them both. Energy bolts ricocheted off the shimmering barrier, leaving scorch marks on the walls and equipment. Protect the team, Lawrence shouted, pushing Ren towards the relative safety of the reactor housing. We need to buy them time to stabilize the core. They moved in perfect synchronization, years of shared experiences manifesting in an almost telepathic awareness of each other's movements. Lawrence deflected incoming fire with his shield, while Ren darted in to deliver precise strikes with her stun baton. As the battle raged, Lawrence felt his shield beginning to weaken. The combined assault of Kazan weapons and the intense radiation was taking its toll. A stray energy bolt slipped through, grazing his arm and leaving a painful burn. Ren saw Lawrence falter, her violet eyes widening in alarm. In that split second, she made a decision that would change everything. She grabbed Lawrence by the collar, pulling him close. Their lips met in a deep, passionate kiss. Lawrence's world exploded in a kaleidoscope of sensation. He felt Ren's Vidian cellular regeneration abilities surging through him, revitalizing his failing shield. But it was more than that. As their kiss deepened, Lawrence sensed a feedback loop forming between them. His human vitality flowed into Ren, while her Vidian resilience poured into him. Their abilities merged and amplified, creating something entirely new. They broke apart, both gasping for breath. Lawrence felt invigorated, his shield glowing brighter than ever. Ren's eyes shone with a new intensity, her movements more fluid and powerful. Well, Lawrence said with a wry smile, that was unexpected. Ren's antenna twitched in what Lawrence now recognized as amusement. Effective, though, wouldn't you say? Their newfound connection gave them an insurmountable edge. They moved as one, anticipating each other's actions with uncanny precision. Kazon elites fell before their combined might, unable to penetrate their enhanced defenses or match their synchronized attacks. Crag, realizing the tide had turned, snarled in frustration. He charged towards the reactor core, intent on sabotaging it as a final act of defiance. Lawrence intercepted him, tackling the Kazan leader onto the reactor housing. As Lawrence grappled with Crag, Ren turned her attention back to the reactor controls. Her enhanced perception allowed her to see the problem with startling clarity. "The human cooling systems can't handle this level of radiation," she called out to Dr. Kira. "We need to adapt it using principles from Vidian's cellular structure." Dr. Kira's eyes widened in understanding. "Of course, the self-repairing nature of our cells could be applied to the coolant system." They worked feverishly, Ren's insights proving crucial in bridging the gap between human and Vidian technology. With each passing second, the reactor's pulsing grew more stable, its angry red glow fading to a calmer blue. On the reactor housing, Lawrence and Crag continued their brutal struggle. Crag fought with the desperate ferocity of a cornered animal, his clawed hands raking across Lawrence's shield. But Lawrence's enhanced abilities gave him the edge, allowing him to match the Kazan's strength and speed. "It's over, Crag," Lawrence grunted, pinning the Kazan leader against the hot metal of the reactor housing. "Your fleet is in retreat. The station is ours." Crag's eyes darted wildly, seeking any avenue of escape. With a snarl, he slammed his head forward, catching Lawrence off guard. The human's grip loosened just enough for Crag to break free. The Kazan leader lunged for the manual override, determined to trigger a meltdown even at the cost of his own life. "No!" Ren cried out, seeing Crag's intentions. Without hesitation, she threw herself into his path, intercepting him mere inches from the override switch. Crag's weapon flashed, its energy blade piercing Ren's side. She cried out in pain, but her intervention had given Lawrence the moment he needed. He tackled Crag with all his enhanced strength, sending them both tumbling off the reactor housing. As they fell, Lawrence's shield flared brightly, enveloping both him and Crag. They crashed onto the chamber floor with bone-jarring force. The impact knocked Crag unconscious, while Lawrence's shield absorbed the worst of the blow. Ignoring the pain radiating through his body, Lawrence scrambled to his feet and rushed to Ren's side. She lay crumpled at the base of the reactor housing, her violet blood seeping onto the floor. "Ren!" Lawrence cradled her in his arms, his heart pounding with fear. "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Ren's eyes fluttered open, filled with pain, but also a deep affection. "Lawrence," she whispered, her voice weak. Did we do it?" Before Lawrence could answer, Dr. Kira's voice rang out. "Core stabilized! We've done it!" A cheer went up from the team, but Lawrence barely heard it. His focus was entirely on Ren, her life slipping away in his arms. He thought of their journey together, from fear and mistrust to this moment of profound connection. He couldn't lose her now. Acting on instinct, Lawrence leaned down and kissed Ren deeply. This time, he consciously focused on channeling his human vitality into her, willing his life force to heal her wound. A soft glow enveloped them, pulsating with the rhythm of their shared heartbeat. Lawrence felt a curious sensation, as if his very essence was flowing into Ren. Her wound began to close, Vidian flesh knitting together at an accelerated rate. The surrounding team watched in awe as human and Vidian biology merged in ways never before seen. The glow intensified, bathing the chamber in a warm, comforting light. As the radiance faded, Ren's eyes fluttered open. She gazed up at Lawrence, her expression a mixture of wonder and deep affection. "So this is what it's like," she whispered, her voice filled with awe, "to truly connect with a human." Lawrence helped her to her feet, both of them feeling profoundly changed by the experience. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions and new possibilities. Their moment of connection was interrupted as Admiral James's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel, the Kazan fleet is in full retreat. I repeat, the Kazan are retreating. Well done, everyone. We've won the day." A fresh wave of cheers erupted throughout the chamber. Human and Vidian alike embraced, the shared victory washing away the last vestiges of distrust between their species. As the celebration swirled around them, Lawrence and Wren stood hand in hand, their fingers intertwined. They had entered this chamber as colleagues and friends. They emerged as something more, pioneers on the frontier of human-Vidian relations, their bond a living symbol of what their peoples could achieve together. The future stretched out before them, filled with challenges, but also boundless possibilities. As Lawrence gazed into Wren's eyes, he knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.